Then Simon said to Michael, "Well, we have taken the work, but we must see we don't get into trouble over it. The leather is dear and the gentleman hot-tempered. We must make no mistakes. Come, your eye is truer and your hands have become nimbler than mine, so you take the measure and cut the boots. I will finish off sewing off the vamps." Michael did as he was told. He took the leather, spread it out on the table, folded it in two, took a knife and began to cut it out. Matrina came and watched him cutting and was surprised to see how he was doing it. Matrina was accustomed to seeing the boots made, and she looked and saw that Michael was not cutting the leather for the boots. He was cutting it round. She wished to say something, but she thought to herself, "Perhaps I do not understand how gentlemen's boots should be made. I suppose Michael knows more about it, and I won't interfere." When Michael had cut up the leather, he took the thread and began to sew, not with two ends as the boots are sewn, but a single end as soft slippers. Again Matrina wondered, but again she did not interfere. Michael sewed on steadily till noon. Then Simon rose for dinner, looked around, and saw that Michael had made slippers out of the gentleman's leather. "Ah!" groaned Simon, and he thought, "How is it Michael, who has been with me a whole year and never made a mistake before, should do such a dreadful thing?" Another year passed, and another, and Michael was now living his 6th year with Simon. He lived as before. He went nowhere, only spoke when necessary, and had only smiled twice in all those years, when Matrina gave him food, and the second time when the gentleman was in their hut. Simon was more pleased with his workmen. He never now asked him where he came from, and only feared lest Michael should go away. They were all at home one day. Matrina was putting iron pots in the oven, and the children were running along the benches looking out the window. Simon was sewing at the window, and Michael was fastening on a heel at the other. One of the boys ran along to the bench, and Michael leaned over his shoulder and looked out of the window. "Look, Uncle Michael! There is a lady with little girls. She seems to be coming here, and one of the little girls is lame." When the boy said that, Michael dropped his work, turned to the window, looked out the street. Simon was surprised. Michael never used to look out into the street, but now was pressed against the window, staring at something. Simon also looked out and saw that the well-dressed woman was really coming to his hut, leading by the hand two little girls in fur coats and woolen shawls. The girls could hardly be told from one another, except that one of them was crippled in her left leg and walked with a limp. The woman stepped into the porch and entered the passage. Feeling about for the entrance, she found the latch, which she lifted, and opened the door. She let the two girls go in first, and followed them into the hut. "Good day, good folk. Pray, come in," said Simon. "What can we do for you?" The woman sat down at the table. The two little girls pressed close to her knees, afraid of the people in the hut. I want leather shoes made for these two little girls for spring. We can do that. We never have made such small shoes, but we can make them. Either welted or turnover shoes. Linen lined. My man, Michael, is master at the work. Simon glanced at Michael and saw that he had left his work and was sitting with his eyes fixed on the little girls. Simon was surprised. It was true the girls were pretty, with black eyes, plump and rosy cheeked, and they were nice kerchiefs for fur coats. But still Simon could not understand why Michael should look at them like that, just as if he had known them before. He was puzzled, but went on talking with the woman and arranging the price. Having fixed it, he prepared the measure. The woman lifted the lame girl onto her lap and said, "Take 2 measures from this little girl. Make 1 shoe for the lame foot, and 3 for the second one. They both have the same sized feet. They are twins." Simon took the measure, and, speaking of the lame girl, said, "How did it happen to her? She is such a pretty girl. Was she born so?" "No, her mother crushed her leg." When Matrina joined in, she wondered who this woman was, and whose children they were, so she said, "Are you not their mother, then?" "No, my good woman, I am neither their mother nor any relation to them. They were quite strangers to me, but I adopted them." "They are not your children, and yet you are so fond of them?" "How can I help being fond of them? I fed them both at my own breast. I had a child of my own, but God took him. I was not so fond of him as I am now of these." "Then whose children are they?" The woman, having begun talking, told them the whole story. "It is about 6 years since their parents died, both in one week. Their father was buried on a Tuesday and their mother died on the Friday. These orphans were born 3 days after their father's death, and their mother did not live another day. My husband and I were living as peasants in the village. We were neighbors of theirs, our yard being next to theirs. Their father was a lonely man, a woodcutter in the forest. When felling trees one day, they let one fall on him. It fell across his body and crushed his bowels out. They hardly got him home before his soul went to God, and that same week his wife gave birth to twins, these little girls. She was poor and alone. She had no one, young or old, with her. Alone she gave them birth, and alone she met her death. The next morning I went to see her, but when I entered the hut she, poor thing, was already stark and cold. In dying, she had rolled on to this child and crushed her leg. The village folk came to the hut, washed the body, laid her out, made a coffin, and buried her. They were good folk. The babies were left alone. What was to be done with them? I was the only woman there who had a baby at the time. I was nursing my firstborn, 8 weeks old, so I took them for a time. The peasants came together and thought of what to do for them, and at last they said to keep me for the present, Mary. You had better keep the girls, and later on we'll arrange what to do with them. So I nursed the sound one at my breast, but at first I did not feed this crippled one. I did not suppose she would live. But then I thought to myself, why should the poor innocent suffer? I pitied her and began to feed her, and so I fed my own boy and these two, and the 3 of them at my own breast. I was young and strong and had good food, and God gave me so much milk that at times it even overflowed. I used sometimes to feed 2 at a time while the third was waiting. When one had enough, I nursed the third, and God so ordered it that these grew up, while my own was buried before he was 2 years old, and I had no more children, though we prospered. Now my husband is working for a corn merchant in the mill. The pay is good, and we are well off, but I have no children of my own, and how lonely I should be without these little girls! How can I help loving them? They are the joy of my life." She pressed the lame little girl to her with one hand, and with the other she wiped the tears from her cheeks. And Matrina sighed and said, "The proverb is true that says one may live without father or mother, but one cannot live without God." So they talked together when suddenly the whole hut was lighted up as though summer lighting from the corner where Michael sat. They all looked toward him and saw him sitting, his hands folded on his knees, gazing upwards and smiling. The woman went away with the girls. Michael rose from the bench, putting down his work, and took off the apron. Then, bowing low to Simon and his wife, he said, "Farewell, masters. God has forgiven me. I ask your forgiveness too for anything done amiss." And they saw the light shone from Michael, and Simon rose, bowed down to Michael, and said, "I see, Michael, that you are no common man, and I can neither keep you nor question you. Only tell me this, how is it that when I found you and brought you home you were gloomy, and when my wife gave you food you smiled at her, and became brighter? Then, when the gentleman came to order the boots, you smiled again and became brighter still. And now, when this woman brought the little girls, you smiled a third time and have become brighter as day." As bright as day. Tell me, Michael, why does your face shine so, and why did you smile those 3 times? And Michael answered, Light shines from me, because I have been punished. But now God has pardoned me, and I smiled 3 times because God sent me to learn 3 truths, and I have learnt them. One, I learned that when your wife pitied me, and that is why I smiled the first time. The second I learnt when the rich man ordered the boots, and then I smiled again. And now when I saw those little girls, I learnt the third and last, and I smiled the third time. And Simon said, "Tell me, Michael, what did God punish you for? And what were the 3 truths, that I too may know them?" And Michael answered, "God punished me for disobeying him. I was an angel in heaven and disobeyed God. God sent me to fetch a woman's soul. I flew to the earth and saw a sick woman lying alone who had just given birth to twin girls. They moved feebly by their mother's side, as she could not lift them to her breast. When she saw me, she understood that God had sent me for her soul, and she wept and said, 'Angel of God, my husband has just been buried, killed by a falling tree. I have neither sister nor aunt nor mother, no one to care for my orphans. Do not take my soul. Let me nurse my babes, feed them, and set them on their feet before I die. Children cannot live without their father or mother.' And I hearkened to her. I placed one child at her breast, and gave the other to her arms, and returned it to the Lord in heaven. I flew to the Lord and said, I could not take the soul of the mother. Her husband was killed by a tree. The woman has twins, and prays that her soul may not be taken. She says, 'Let me nurse and feed my children, and set them on their feet.' Children cannot live without a father or mother. I have not taken her soul." And God said, "Go, take the mother's soul, and learn these 3 truths. Learn what dwells in man, what is not given to man, and what men live by. When thou hast learnt these 3 things, thou shalt return to heaven." So I flew again to the earth, and took the mother's soul. The babes dropped from her breast, her body rolled over the bed and crushed one babe, twisting its leg. I rose above the village, wishing to take her soul to God, but the wind seized me, and my wings drooped and fell off. Her soul rose alone to God, and I fell to the earth by the roadside.